stuck at home with. Thank you. Thank you for recording. I wanted the recording to start first. Thanks, Sharon. And thank you, Sharon and Annie from my staff for manning this without me there, to Claire for all the help at the Park District. Appreciate everybody turning out for this follow-up meeting. And Nurin, I'm sorry that I'm not there to meet you as well. Just wanted to wave hello. I'll be keeping an eye out on the chat online here. But appreciate everybody coming in. Sorry for the interruption to your presentation, but go ahead and start now that everything is being recorded.
Thank you all. So that our project manager meant. I'm the environmental director for People's Gas. So Patrick and Matt both refer to me. So if you can't hear me, please say something. Project to the back into the alley at the same time. So bear with me. If you guys could save your questions at the end, answer any and all questions you have, but it'll just help the flow of the meeting if I can get through the presentation. It should take about 25 minutes, I think, and I'm happy to stay as long as you want for Q&A. Great.
So let me know when we are.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So we're going to talk about the project plant site. So sure might be what is a manufactured gas plant. So that's okay. We're going to talk about that too. We're going to talk about the history of the property. This fantastic park we're on now is actually another half of the manufactured gas plant site. So in essence, we're cleaning up the second half of the same environmental property. We're going to talk about the proposed cleanup plan that we have with the United States Environmental Protection Agency. We're going to talk about temporary impacts that as residents, you might encounter smells, noises, dust, traffic, and how we're going to do our best to mitigate all of those. And then lastly, we're going to talk about our community outreach efforts. All right, so the project is here. It's 2730 South Eleanor. This is about a 4-acre parcel of an original 8-acre site. So that is the proposed project. So to the east of us, about 3.7 acres. And this was the site we cleaned up historically. As you can see, it's vacant. It was a former manufactured gas plant site, which we at the company refer to as the South Station site. And I'll talk more about what manufactured gas plant sites are. Whether important. And working with the US EPA, we'd like to start our cleanup at the end of this month. And by start, I mean start to mobilize equipment. I'll talk more about the schedule. The actual cleanup portion most likely won't start until January. Here's an aerial view of the site. Again, we're at the park to the left, and then the subject property is to the right. Eleanor and Loomis. And then this is, I think, kind of a neat shot facing west from, or southwest technically, from Loomis, and you can see the vacant property, and then you can see this part just on the other side, and the Chicago River on the right. So what is a manufactured gas plant site? At the turn of the century, when I say the century, I mean the late 1800s and early 1900s, they were ubiquitous around America and around the world. So historically, gas was produced by burning coal in its simplest form. So gas was originally used for streetlights, also known as gas lights. Then they were used for cooking, and then the final use was indoor heating. So Bridgeport is actually home of multiple manufactured gas plant sites, many of which we've historically cleaned up. This is the historic South Station site, and this is the site that we'll be talking about. This is the property. The drawings on there have been pulled from historic fire insurance maps, just so you get a sense of where the operations were, the underground structures, both on the subject property and the park that was cleaned up in the past. There was a People's Gas, I mean, for those of you who've been here, you probably remember the People's Gas warehouse that was demolished several years ago. And again, we're working with the United States Environmental Protection Agency to clean up any residual impacts underneath the soil for potential future use. Right, so this part 571, aka the boathouse, was cleaned up. So I don't recall the exact time frame. I want to say, at least round numbers, I'm going to say around 10 years ago. And then I believe it was transferred to the city of Chicago and then to the Chicago Park District. And then the site essentially went from what is behind you, a vacant lot, gravel, environmental, affected environmentally, to this awesome park that we're at right now. And now we have the opportunity to clean up the second half of the property, working with the USEPA. So what is the cleanup? Essentially, there's approximately 65,000 cubic yards of impacted material impacted from the historic use, manufacturing gas. We're going to excavate the soil in two portions, generally two portions in pink, down to approximately 10 feet. Then we're going to backfill that with clean gravel and clean vacuum material. We're also going to use another form of technology to minimize truck traffic, where we take a grout, mix it in with certain impacts on the ground, and solidify it. So what's left is no longer an environmental waste. It's essentially an inert material. Water cannot pass through it. It's impermeable and it will not leach. That will reduce our schedule and greatly minimize the amount of truck traffic that's going in and out of the neighborhood. So what to expect when you're remediating? We've got 3 pictures on the left. Excavators. This is not, I don't believe that was this property, but it was another cleanup. We've successfully cleaned up dozens of manufactured gas plant sites throughout Chicago, working with our regulatory friends. We have excavators, yellow, what we call yellow iron or construction vehicles to excavate material and to backfill. That's on the left. In the middle is what we're going to call a batch plant. So what's a batch plant? A batch plant is essentially where we're going to store and manufacture this grout that I talked about, that we're going to mix underground with some of the impacted material to solidify it and neutralize it in place. It also helps us work a little safer, close to the shoreline. And the last thing, I think there's some, I don't know if we can remove it. If not, that's fine. But the last thing is a machine driving in sheet pile. We're going to be driving in sheet pile along the road to help maintain the stability. That's fine. All right, so let's talk about the day-to-day impacts. So in general buckets, we have truck traffic, dust and odors, and sound. So let's talk about truck traffic. We are cognizant that this is a residential neighborhood. We're not going to have trucks idling on the street. We have a traffic control plan, which we'll talk about. We're going to have traffic controls. We will have a street sweeper on site and daily monitoring for dust. In the event of dust, the street sweeper is going to be going up and down the street. Now, it's not going to happen in the middle of winter just because street sweepers don't work in the middle of winter, but we are going to be doing everything we can to control and mitigate dust on the street. We are going to have the security fence up will have some sort of visual barrier for safety and for privacy. We also don't want an eyesore. You guys are looking into an active construction site. We're going to be keeping an eye on it. So sometimes during heavy wind events or storms, there are tears in the fabric that happen. So we're going to keep an eye on that and replace those as quickly as possible. We want it to be aesthetically pleasing. You guys are going to be putting up with a lot for a clean property. We want to make sure we're respectful of your neighborhood to minimize any impacts. There will not be any trucks staged in front of the site or on the street. Sometimes truck drivers are enthusiastic in their zeal to get to a job site early. They stage in front of your property, often really early in the morning. That's not going to happen here. We're working with other property owners to stage our trucks off-site. I will have a figure that I'll show later that shows how they are going to come in. The only time you should ever see them on your street is when they're coming in to our property to pick up, and then when they leave to load out. There should not ever be any idling trucks on site. So I'll get into a little more detail on truck traffic later. The dust and the odors. So I talked about the street sweepers and the dust. An environmental cleanup is technically a construction site. And construction sites have dust. I wish it wasn't so. We want to be respectful of that. Like I said, we will have a street sweeper. We have the ability to water down the site if it's dry, if it's windy. So we're going to go and give as much effort as we can to minimizing impacts to dust going off site. As for odors, it's very likely that you're going to smell something. So what are you going to smell? Likely, if you smell something, you'll smell like either mothballs. Sometimes I feel like people don't know what mothball smell like anymore. But if you don't know what mothball smells like, it might smell a little bit like gasoline. So if you smell gasoline, you could recently think, oh my gosh, I smell gasoline. What does that mean? The odor threshold for these chemicals is much different than the health threshold. These things, much like getting a drop of gasoline in your hand when you fill up your car, you could smell it, orders and orders and orders and orders of magnitude before it's even remotely a health threat. So 100% transparency, you could very well smell something. If you smell something, we're smelling it too. We have guys and gals working in the excavated area. We're going to do our best to control it with keeping it wet, using an inert foam to cover it up, to do everything we can to keep the nuisances down. It's unlikely that it's just going to be ever present, right? We have a work day. We do our best to control our work areas. So we're not going to uncover, for example, the entire site. Now you have these impacts that worst case scenario, if the weather's right and the wind's right, the conditions are right, you might smell. We'll be working in tight confined areas to minimize odor. But we want to be transparent that much like when this property was cleaned up, you could very well on occasion, when the wind conditions are right and the work area is right and the depth is right, you could smell something. We do have air monitoring. We have perimeter air monitors all around the work site. We have the workers being monitored, and we have monitoring in the work area itself with the little handheld device called the photo ionization detector, a PID. The ending of a PID basically is a Geiger count for certain volatile chemicals, right? The main purpose of that is to keep the workers safe, but it's also a really quick litmus test if there's some other impact. Like I said, we've successfully cleaned up over a dozen, I'm gonna say closer to 2 dozen sites throughout Chicago, and we've never had any measurable impacts that have left the property line that I recall even caused us to slow down or stop work. Nevertheless, it's an environmental site. We want to be transparent that theoretically, these are things that could be encountered and that we have means and methods to control them. We've also notified our friends at the city, our friends at the Illinois EPA, the United States Environmental Protection Agency. We have an approved air monitoring plan that's been used on sites in Chicago, in Waukegan, throughout the Midwest successfully with the US EPA to protect human health and the environment on sites just like this that are adjacent to residential areas. Lastly would be the sound. Just like it sounds, pounding in sheet pile is loud. We're not going to be pounding in sheet pile the entire time. It'll be a limited activity. We'll do our best to communicate when that happens to the alderman's office, so folks aren't surprised. It should be a finite activity. So if you can just bear with us, we work within the city's noise ordinance. I believe it's 8 to 5, and if I'm wrong, I apologize. But we have a permit. We're going to work within the noise ordinance, and again, we're going to do our best to keep nuisances down. The sheet pile has to be installed for safety to maintain the integrity of the adjacent road and bridge. Okay, so let's talk traffic. Trucks, there's a few colors here. So the green is essentially where the trucks are coming in and coming out. They will be coming in generally off the expressways via Archer, coming up Loomis into Eleanor and then up into the site. They're going to do all their work, load out in the site, and then leave the same way. There is a chance that based on where the trucks come from, they don't always come from the same place. They come from multiple different trucking companies. They could be coming in from Ashland, Sermon to Loomis. But again, the goal is to keep them off of Eleanor as much as possible. And then lastly, we are working on arrangements for them to be staged on Blackland on the industrial area north of the river, so they're not idling and inconveniencing or annoying anyone here. We will be working with the city to get no parking areas and portions of the sidewalk immediate in front of the site for safety reasons will have to be closed because of the truck traffic. And that's just a blown up view. You can see trucks will either be coming in the north or through the south through a secured gate entrance and then leaving to the south. There have been a few questions on air monitoring. My colleague at EPA has graciously offered to talk about that. Let me hand off to Lauren.
So again, I'm Lauren Bumba. I'm with US EPA out of our office here in Chicago. And as Noreen mentioned, there are a number of MGP sites here in this immediate vicinity, including this one that EPA has primary oversight of. We refer to these as Superfund alternative sites in our language. And it basically means we're in an agreement with People's Gas where they will conduct investigations and in this case, cleanup under our oversight. So again, we have primary review and oversight responsibility, and a lot of times I get questions of like, what does that mean? What does oversight actually mean? So it can mean a variety of things. Either we can be on site, you know, observing the work, making sure that all the approved plans are being followed. It could also mean that we're expecting, you know, updates regularly on the progress of this work, including air monitoring and air sampling results. And it can mean that if there is an issue that we can reach out, look into it and say, hey, what were the air monitoring results from this day specifically, and ask for kind of a report out at that more granular level as well. CDPH, who's here in attendance today, is aware of this work, but again, because this is a federal lead oversight project, they're more in a support role and we're in the lead role. We have an air monitoring and management plan that's available on our website currently, and the website is linked at the bottom of this slide. The slides, as well as some FAQs from the previous meeting, are also posted on there if you want to check them out afterwards. And then also throughout the cleanup process, we're committing to providing biweekly updates on the web so you can kind of follow along. And if you want to look at any of that data, including air monitoring and sampling data, it will be there for you to take a look at. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Lauren.
Yep.
Let's talk briefly about community outreach. As mentioned, this is the second of 2 meetings. I believe many of you should have received some fact sheets by now, and I believe we had some door-to-door mailings delivered as well, just to make sure that as many people as possible are in the loop and aware. We do have a designated phone number. It's 877-380-0522. I believe that will be on our signage on the when the project goes live as well. If you have any questions, any concerns, please call that number. We will get back to you as soon as possible. I think we do our best to get back to you by the next business day. I would ask that if there's any odors, noise, what have you, that you start with that number first. I mean, you have the right to call 311. My concern is that 311 is getting thousands of calls, and you certainly can do that, but I just don't want that getting lost in the shuffle when this is going to like a team that's manning it all the time just for this project. So I'd like to put that out. Any questions, concerns, comments, annoyances, inconveniences that come up, please call that number. And People's Gas environmental team and our community relations team will get back to you as soon as possible. Mentioned our project start date is October 27th. And basically what that means is on October 27th, trucks are going to start to come in and start delivering equipment. This is a fairly moderately sized cleanup site. We expect working into first or potentially second quarter 2027, depending on the weather. So for the first couple, 3 months, it's going to be us setting up, putting on equipment, putting out trailers, even mundane things like hooking up electricity, make sure the Wi-Fi works for the machinery and the porta potties. But the actual, what I would call construction remediation work should not begin until January. I think that's the end of the presentation before the I think we did truck ones. Okay, before we open for Q&A, or if the Alderman's office or anyone else has anything to add, I did want to thank you guys one more time. The site's literally in your front yards. You guys were, and I don't know who's here, who remembers the last cleanup, but you guys were amazing to work with. before, and it's just awesome to see this property go from that. For those of you on the line, I'm pointing east. To this, it's like phenomenal, like beautiful park. Like there were kids running cross country. We came early. We saw kids running cross country. We saw kayakers. There was a family doing Tai Chi outside. It's amazing. We're just here to clean up the site. Like that's what environmental people do. We do environmental stuff. So I don't have any line of sight into what decisions the company's going to make. It's handled by a different group after cleanup. They typically kind of compartmentalize those decisions. But I did want to thank you. I spent a lot of time in Bridgeport, when I was younger. And it's just an amazing place. I want to thank you guys in advance for letting us clean up this property. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions anyone might have. And if there are questions, I'm going to remember to repeat them to the owl so everyone can hear. Sometimes people online cannot hear.
I'll just say a couple things just to chime in here real quick. Thanks for the presentation. I know some of this stuff was a repeat from the last meeting, but I think for anybody that's new, it was really helpful. And I know that for the folks that lived through the first remediation, and they're in the room, that's what's going to drive a lot of the questions. I think that you'll probably hear follow-ups to. I appreciate our representative from the EPA being here, especially given the state of the current government shutdown. I don't know how that affects you, but if you're here in your own time, I really appreciate you being here today to join us for this meeting. And also for the CDPH representatives that are in the room, just to remind everybody, uh, and just to address the thing that you kind of addressed right at the end. I've indicated to People's Gas and to others that once this site is remediated, that my hope is that this property will be able to be part of an extended Park 571. There's going to be a lot of community conversation about this, so it's not like I'm going to snap my fingers and make that happen, just like that, and there will be no discussion about it. If you know me at all, you'll know that we'll have plenty of conversations about what's going to happen over here if we're lucky enough to get this into the city's park district portfolio, which is something that, is a priority for me. Other than that, I wanted to just sort of pick up where the last meeting left off, which were, we had this follow-up meeting in particular because of questions having to do with the air quality, I think with the traffic plan, which you guys have already addressed. Parking, I'm not sure that we necessarily addressed that earlier, but I know that's a big concern for the community, obviously, while you're working for 18 months. Is the plan currently for people who are working on the work site to park on the property? Because it is a sizable piece of land and you're not going to be working on all of it.
Yeah, the plan is for site workers, site visitors, site staff to park on the property and not on the street. As I mentioned before, due to safety concerns, we'll have to work with the city to block off a few spots by the gate, in the immediate front, but we plan on parking on the job site.
Do you have any idea how many cars you'll be able to park on the job site? And the part B to that question is, do you foresee a time where you can predict that you'll need overflow parking beyond what's on the property and the few spots that are right in front of the property itself on the street where there'll be no parking signs already?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can't give you the exact number of cars we anticipate. I can't foresee any situation where we have overflow parking. I mean, there's plenty of space on the site for the construction teams and even for visitors. So I'm not concerned about that. I mean, is there a chance that maybe someday someone unannounced comes by and parks on the street? Yeah, but that'd be a one-off and definitely not how we're going to run the project.
Okay. And just because I know this is a real big concern for the community, there was talk at the last meeting of potentially reaching out to somebody like Brandenburg or there's some empty lots further east on Eleanor that are available for lease. I did pass along some of that information to People's Gas. I know that's not you necessarily who's here representing for the meeting, but that information has been passed along. Should there be a need for additional overflow parking? I believe that People's Gas is willing to explore potentially leasing space in the neighborhood so that it doesn't take up residential parking. So
Yeah,
I want,
absolutely. We did
oh,
receive that, and thank you. Thank you.
yeah,
Right now, the plan is to stay on the site, but we appreciate having a backup plan on another property if needed.
that's great. And I am, just so that I can close the loop on this, there was a question of whether or not we can put a permanent no parking signs up while the project is going on. I am working with CDOT on that right now. That's our intention. We haven't gotten final approval over that just yet, but that is what that's what me and my office are working on right now for all the residents that are there. So that can be properly marked there. We don't necessarily relish the idea of having paper signs up for 18 months. And that people are going to respect us. We're working towards getting permanent signs, um, metal signs put up for the duration of the project. So we are working on that. We'll let everybody know as soon as we get confirmation on that. And with that, I can turn it over for questions.
So you're saying in the Q and A, not, so when we send the Q and A, either we're given, like, there might be days of people and they're just gonna park in our name. And like, I can, like, down the road, or like, they are parked, and often is a thing. So I would like to hear a little bit more specificity on like where exactly they're parking. Because like there's already enough traffic and we're talking about through how many.
Sure. So the question was the discrepancy between the presentation that site staff will be parked on site only.
It's not even fun. The other thing was like the start time and outline what we engage 8 o'clock and in Q and A, so we might be here until 6:30 as well. So again, I'm asking like what's the line?
Okay, so to restate, the question is, talk about some discrepancies between the fact sheet and what I said. So I'll start with the first one. Plan is to have site staff, okay, on site only. One of the reasons for this presentation was to provide a little additional information based on the feedback from last time. So I'm aware that that was a concern. People's Gas is aware that was a concern. So again, the plan is to have staff park on site. Again, is it possible that there might be a one-off or one person parks on the street? Sure, we can say that about anything, but it is not our intention to have chronic visitors, field team, regular folks park on the street. Everything will be on the site. If you see anything that should proceed to the contrary, call the number. I'll go back and reiterate that. Again, I'm telling you, based on your feedback, we're going to be on site.
Can I just follow up with that then? Can you assure everybody then that the worksite staff and any visitors will be directed to park on site, um, inside the gate and not on the street?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And we should get the fact sheet updated as well then, just so that there's no more confusion.
The hours. Municipal code for Chicago is 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Any kind of noise we have to generate is done at that time. If you want to arrive at site at 6:30, you can, but no cleaning of the pools and screaming out each other. We're not gonna say you can't be there, you can't make noise until 8 a.m. You have to stop by 8 p.m. 7 days a week. You're talking about sheep hiring, sure there can be a lot of places. People who are normally boom, all day long, we will come out, but there's nothing we don't know about there. Says people are gonna vote.
So a discrepancy, or between what was identified, so we'll clarify that. We can update the fact sheet and we can specifically say 6:30, comma, parentheses, semicolon, arrive on site. No, we can agree on language like construction, significant noise to be made per City of Chicago Municipal Code. So thank you for pointing that out, and we can absolutely clarify that. So thank you for that. And thanks for clarifying about it. Shoot. Yes.
Funding for the one at the speed of the overall project and the bond, we have bond for the project.
The question was, will the current challenges with the government shutdown and government funding affect the speed of the project or their monitoring of the project? The answer is no. This is 100% funded by People's Gas, not the EPA. It's just being done in a collaborative agreement with US EPA, so we have an authorization to start work, but our work funding schedule is independent of the shutdown political situation. Yeah. Yeah, that's part of the same, everything's tied to part, what I'll call quote unquote the project, but the project stays live because it's 100% funded by People's Gas, independent of EPA.
So why would they make it?
Right. Oh, it's Timothy. It's Jim Ross.
I heard my name. I'm sorry. Can I ask a question?
Hi, Kim, how are you?
Hi, everybody. Lauren, Nora, nice to see you both. I'm actually a resident of McKinley Park, and when I saw this announcement, I was like, oh, something I actually know a little bit about. And so I actually had two specific questions. And you may have discussed this in the first meeting, and my apologies if I missed it. I was wondering if there's any testing or plans to look at potential impacts to the Chicago sanitation and ship canal, similar to the Crawford MPG site. So just thinking about similarities. And then my second question is, are community members able to access the technical reports that People's Gas is providing to EPA? I raise this as a former resident of Little Village, where we worked with People's Gas and EPA and provided technical assistance. And we were able to review a lot of the technical documents that People's Gas was submitting to be able to highlight and make recommendations on just things that we were seeing and patterns that we were seeing. So I was just curious about those two things. Thank you.
Sure, yeah, it's good to hear from you, Kim. So the question is, People's Gas investigating the adjacent Chicago River for potential impacts? The answer is yes. That's being treated as a different project just because this is an upland remediation. The technology and methodology is totally different than sampling and testing and coming up with a cleanup plan for the sediments. But that is something long-term that, yes, People's Gas is looking into all of its sites that are adjacent to the Chicago River, what the potential impacts are to the river, and working with the US EPA on that. The second question was the community's ability to have access to the sites. Like everything that we submit to US EPA, all documents, once they're finalized, are publicly available. The way our agreement with US EPA, and this is more of a legal thing, is the ability for third parties to review something that's part of an agreement between the federal government and third party is limited. With our friends at Little Village, there is that was sort of a corner case because of a mechanism involving a special grant and some environmental justice issues. Again, for this, all documents will be publicly available as soon as they're finalized. EPA puts them on their website, and anyone can review them at their leisure.
And we can share that link again. We've shared that before. This is Alderman Lee.
Yeah, we do it.
There's a question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Do you remember the frequency of that? Is that bi-weekly? It's bi-weekly. So the question was, how often is the air quality sampling published and finalized? And that would be bi-weekly. Yes.
Follow up on the first.
Yeah.
We usually have a week and it's negative. We're in the first is on one. And as you mentioned, no work with science going on. Or very low science going on. Basically, got a lot of time.
Sure. So question is, how many entrances and exits? And then the number, was it the number of parking signs and where the no parking signs and where they're going? Yeah, that is a good question. Emily, our construction manager for Burton McDonald's here. Can you talk about the entrances? I think you might have better line of sight into that than I do.
We will have two construction. Will follow along
Can we
And
ask
so
that whoever
Yeah.
answered that question come closer to the microphone? None of us heard that online.
So the question, the original question was with two parts. One, the number of entrances and exits. So I misspoke. It's not one, it's two. Emily, that's correct. So I apologize for misspeaking. And I think the second question was more specificity about where the no parking signs are going to be
Well,
posted.
so we got the no parking sign where the drivers are. My question, I have a question. Will the time them stop? Is it no parking? Sure.
So the question is, are there any times on, like, will there be time restrictions? Like, for example, no parking 8 to 4, or we'll just say no parking. Is that the question? All right, I don't,
Zero, wall or fence being, that's why I asked the wall. You, go to that fence on the wall, back.
so I just want to close up the loop on the parking timing. I don't know, and I will find out. I don't want to give you the wrong answers. I don't know if it says 9 to 5, 8 to 4, or just no parking. So we'll find out and we will circle back ASAP to you guys in the Alderman's office. So thank you for bringing that clarity to our attention. I think the second question was, what was the cover?
What is the fence, the chain link fence, the wall?
Yes, so essentially it's going to be the same chain link fence. It'll have some sort of generic industrial green, thick fabric filtered over it. It's a visual barrier, and even though it's fabric, it's still helps with noise, and maybe most importantly, it'll keep, larger particulates, dust, rocks, and so forth on the site. And not on the sidewalk. Again, we're gonna have staff patrolling the site, keeping the sidewalks clean, keeping the streets clean.
You're concerned that your patrons are able to park where they are to visit your business?
Yeah.
Like if they did something,
Not the case.
but
Residents park there.
it's like you would be happier if you still park overnight to.
Yeah. 8 AM, 6, or something like that, that'd be great.
That seems like something you could talk to the board office.
Yeah, so they're ideally, you prefer like a finite 8 to 4, 8 to 5, and not no parking. Okay.
I think a lot of that's gonna be based on what the permit request is to CDOT. Whatever we put on there should probably match what the permit request to CDOT was, which I don't have in front of me. But they should be limited to the hours that they're operating, not just no parking all the time.
It would be helpful, Alderman, if, the parking currently, the parking on the north side of Elmwood going east of Loomis, has an old sign that's faded somewhat that says, tow zone, so it's 50 now.
Yeah. that-
Actually,
Is that Kevin?
Yes.
Okay, Kevin, yeah, we're working on getting all the signs refreshed on the street in addition to adding new signs.
Well, yeah, we don't necessarily have to pray. I don't want to go
I'm so sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
I think everything, you prefer everything. Only you and Kevin would put on that. Between you and the hour, Kevin.
We have a question from Dylan. So that we just.
It says, after reviewing the letter of intent to conduct early removal action, this was conducted under the CERCLA versus the process discussed under administrative settlement agreement and order on consent. Could you comment on why PGL chose to go this route?
Sure, do the fire. Sure, yeah, that. Oh,
That was a question that was in
Yeah.
the chat.
yeah, well, thanks, Dylan. That's a very technical question, which means I'm happy to talk about it. So People's Gas has a master agreement with the United States Environmental Protection Agency. We entered into 2008, I believe. And the agreement basically says that we are willingly working with the US EPA to clean up sites. And the way we're gonna do this is we're gonna conduct investigation work, We're going to come up with feasibility studies. We're going to agree on a cleanup. We're going to negotiate agreement to clean up the site. We're going to submit a plan to get approved, and then we're going to do the work. That's a long process. It takes, just the way it's written, it can often take 10, 15 years to get through. Working with US EPA and their initiative to move sites through Superfund as quickly as possible, there are different administrative off-ramps, and one of them is called, it has different names based on the era. It's most often referred to as an early action, where you can go to US EPA and petition them and say, we have enough data. It's a very clear-cut case. There's a greater good. Maybe it's a future development or a property owner, or there's some important need, and we can get this site done sooner rather than going through the 20-year, potentially plus administrative and legal process. So those are called early actions. When the site was demolished, and seeing the opportunity here, we thought that there'd never be a better time to ask EPA. So this seems like a pretty good candidate. We could follow the bouncing ball and be here another 5, 6, 7 years of work. We could strike while the iron's hot. People's Gas has the resources. Speak too much for EPA's resources, but at the time, EPA had the resources, and they still have the will. Like Lauren is still here to clean up the site. So that's why we're doing this through an early action, and that, which is technically allowed under, both the CERCLA regulations as well as the administrative one. So that's why we're here, to do this faster rather than longer. So that was it's a very good regulatory question.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dylan.
Yeah.
That's good.
I've got one last follow-up question to that. I was looking over some of the sampling, specifically some of the groundwater classification samples that were collected in 2023, and the dates jumped out to me because this was a very memorable date. It was right after the major flooding I think probably most of us were impacted by on, I think, the week of July 4th. I noticed a number of groundwater samples conducted specifically for conductivity. Do you think that those samples would be representative of the actual matrix of the groundwater, given the heavy flood event at that time?
So I'll give you a short answer and a longer answer. The short answer is I'm not 100% sure I was ready to talk about groundwater data from 2023. So that is a good question. The longer answer is we've collected many years worth of data. We typically collect them quarterly over multiple years. That's so you can get an average, right? So Dylan, to your point, did what happened that at that time, at that event, based on the extreme weather, is that representative of the site? Without looking at the data and drilling through it with our scientists and geologists, I don't know. I would say probably not, just because it's an extreme case. I think the longer answer would be, that's why we collect data, to get an average. Just like if you can't think of a better analogy. I'm taking a temperature, you would take temperatures maybe once an hour to get the average temperature of the day, and not, well, yesterday it was 80 degrees because at 4 in the afternoon it was 80 degrees. So that's a super good technical question. Kind of wish I had more time to move the data with you. Typically, we look at as much data as we can to look for patterns and trends.
Thank you for that.
Next question. Yep, thank you, Dylan.
Yeah, we are social for your since I got out loud. Regarding this, I'm wondering if you could address the specific motivation for people to move this site along. Like, is there a financial impetus? Is there something you're worried about staying on site? What's going on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So 100% transparency. We just want to clean up sites. Like, I'm an environmental engineer by trade. Like, I went to school and I worked for the government. I worked for the city of Chicago. I lived in Chicago. I just want to clean up sites. The company just wants to clean up sites. It's not part of some, and if it was, I would tell you. And if I couldn't tell you, I would say, I can't tell you. But I am going to tell you, we just want to clean up as many sites as we can. We have the staff. We have the resources, we have the timing, we have friends at the US EPA. It's not often in life that all these things line up. We have, like, it's a vacant site and it's just sitting there. So we thought, I mean, I spent tons of time in Bridgeport since my twenties, just driving by and seeing the building. And one day I worked for the company. No, that's what that building is. So we're just here to clean up sites. There's no motive, just as soon as we can, as fast as we can. As you know, also, things don't get cheaper the longer you wait. At least things in my household have been getting a little more expensive recently, but that bleeds over into construction costs, labor costs, salaries, everything. I don't want to turn this into something, but the bottom line is everything's getting more expensive. So cleaning up a site today is always more cost effective for everyone than cleaning it up tomorrow or in 5 years. But that's the bottom line. We're just here to clean up sites.
So basically, even though EPA's timeline has moved because of things around the rules control, you guys are just thinking ahead because you already have an already in place and it's expensive to change it, so it's going.
Yeah, and I'll give EPA credit because they speak for my. Yeah, because
That's despite when you are around you, but there are things like that.
yeah, I mean, I suppose EPA could have said, well, stop work, and then we don't know when this is gonna get resolved. Maybe start work next quarter, or maybe next summer, or maybe next year, or maybe like Dylan said, we just follow a bouncing ball and maybe just clean it up in 5 or 6 years, right? We don't know what the political climate will look like then. So I give them credit. They said, we've worked with you before. We've done dozens of cleanups together. And I've worked with Lauren, not just in Illinois, but in other states, cleaning up gas plant sites. So I don't know if you want to speak too much.
No, and I think, Kate, we've talked about this a little bit, but I think there's a number of factors from our end that made a lot of sense. I think the fact that People's Gas is looking at cleaning this up to residential standards is a huge benefit, especially knowing the interest in redeveloping this site. I think we would have had a little bit more caution if it was to an industrial standard and maybe would have followed it through with the circular process like Dylan was talking about. I think also cleaning up soil makes a lot of sense because some of this material does still remain as a source then for groundwater or other types of contamination. So if we can kind of turn off the sink before it starts overflowing and, making a huge mess and trying to clean that up, I think it makes a lot of sense. So hopefully, addressing soil right now will kind of limit some of those other impacts to groundwater and surface water, things like that. So those are a couple of our factors. Sorry.
No, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Is there not been the shared funding result more often than ever? They'll take on
Sure. So the question is there an option to see air monitoring results more than twice a week? Do you want to do that or do you want me to?
Sorry.
Yeah, so the air monitor, the perimeter, we try and answer this without seeming like I'm dancing around it. The air monitoring data that we get around the perimeter is just basically reams and reams of like numerical data. It's not like, for example, we can go to a website and see like, what's the wildfire conditions, or what's the smoke conditions, or what have you. It's just raw data that needs to be interpreted by computers and by people to look for trends. I think Dylan mentioned like groundwater trends, that this one day affect, so whatever the long-term trend of the groundwater. So if that's not practical, if the real question is like, hey, there's kids next door. Like you got environmental side here, you got kids here. Think about the kids. Like I said, we have real-time air monitoring in the excavation area. Unlike smoke, soot, wildfire, dust that are kind of thick, chunky particulates, they're easily documented, easily grabbed, and easily measured. The kind of super low level chemicals that we're talking about that you could smell, right? That aren't a health issue, could volatilize. Like you could smell the gas, for example, if it smells like gas and you could smell it, it would never come up, like even remotely above any threshold, 5, 10, 20 feet away. So it's not like an at a glance, and it's not like, well, you can look at the data and tell that it's, a danger to the kids. We know from real-time data, and the site's gonna be covered up like on weekends, and like when we're not working, we're not gonna leave like the big hole open, but the best data we have is at the source, like the guy or the gal with the handheld device, like, oh, it's getting higher, let's foam it, or it's getting lower, everything's fine. It's a function of, and I'm sorry if it seems like I'm being deliberately vague, but it's unfortunately a vague, it's just a vague science. It's the temperature, the wind conditions, You know, there's different fact, how deep's the excavation? What's the chemical? And I can tell you, we would never have a condition where there were kids there and we had screaming hot readings, for example, and then we didn't do anything about it other than just like covered incident. So maybe that's not the best answer. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just sort of the state of the technology for cleanups like this, even in residential areas. Lauren, I don't know if you would. About
You know, bad, which is on site, will the neighbor resident find out?
So if the, let's say, if the Geiger, or if the sniffer, for lack of a better word, goes off high enough where we have to shut down the job site, yeah, we could, I don't think we would have an issue, you know, contact the alderman and say, just so you know, we had a thing, we had to shut down the job site. Again, I totally get your concern, like, yeah, I got a kid, I would be concerned. I just want you to know, you just had it coming from me that, like we've done a dozen of these, we've had some where there was tar bubbling at the surface. And we didn't have any issues, but I totally get it. And we're gonna be cognizant of that communication. Yeah,
We have a lot of like information about how the area is like overburdened by environment, specifically air pollution. We're essentially going to be sitting next to a project that is going to be then worse. And we also are in like the dating silence demolition. The very air parts on the street, we were covered in dust and then obviously they shut it down. But like we had dust on our cars Tuesday and Thursday they shut down the site. So my question is, and especially like given kind of the uncertainty at a federal level, the EPA to like function the way they should, not their fault, that is, and I still want to hear the government shut down. And so my question is, given that CDPH is not at the table in terms of a real regulatory body, and EPA could theoretically get, but like we're not out of that, but what is the responsibility here in like maintaining and making sure that this is still in compliance, even if like the federal compliance bodies maybe function.
sure. So the question is, who's responsible if there's no US EPA?
And like, just to be clear, like, Bridgeport is like a bit for the top of it, like, this is where people, like, these three census tracts have the most people with COPD, asthma, and Bridgeport. So like, we already have those close to top. Not mentioning.
Yeah, you want to answer the jurisdiction, like what happens if you guys are not working?
Yeah, hi, I'm sorry, I can't make eye contact with you from my spot, but, so yeah, you know, as far as the EPA role, I mean, we are still operating, during the shutdown. I don't anticipate that I will be going anywhere. And that I do expect that People's Gas will continue to follow our plans regardless of, you know, any uncertainties in the future. And as Naren mentioned, you know, they're ultimately the first line of defense doing the air monitoring, and if there's an exceedance of an action level, you know, they're responsible for making that call to shut down work. And, you know, that air monitoring is happening, you know, during the entire duration of the project, regardless of EPA status. We do work very closely with our state agency as well as a partner, and they are always the second option. If something unexpected were to happen, Illinois EPA is our support agency on this project, as well as all the other Superfund sites in this area. So they would kind of be my next phone call in terms of reaching out and making sure that this continues to be overseen.
Yeah, and that's something that you're doing on other sites too, not just this one.
Right, yeah, yeah.
We got our own air monitoring stuff, with like no offense, like, like, EPA not done a good job in terms of like alerting people or letting them know or shutting down sites in a time. And so if we had our own call, like how quickly can we assume that this gets resolved? Like, so if I get one of those purple air monitoring things, put it on my front door, it beeps or whatever, I call. What, if I call the number that you provided, what is my expectation or reasonable response from your?
Can you tell me more about this purple monitoring?
Like an air quality monitor.
What is it?
There's like a network of like environmental groups that have been putting them out because of the lack of. What happens,
Yeah, five, very.
Gotcha. So particles, basically dust. Yeah, if you want to get a dust monitor for your house, and if you think your house is getting dusty because of stuff that we're doing, then you should get a dust monitor for your house and call the number and say, I got a dust monitor in my house. Your house, it went beep, beep, beep this day, and that was the day I looked out the window and I saw you were sending out big plumes of dust.
But I think if we notice it, we call the number, how quickly am I going to get some sort of thing in a way that.
Well, I think,
Like, do I have to go down on the site and like, use the box here, or like what, how much time is like calling the number, getting a response, or like smells and dust, oh, yeah.
well, I think they tend to call back within one business day. Yes, so I had to fly out back there.
Am I hearing this correctly? If you emergency shut down, if your air quality poor, you're protecting your workers. And the community is not being good. Am I hearing that correct?
No, I don't think so. If there was an emergency,
Well, you would expect workers to be there, and they're not there. Would I make that assumption and?
No.
As our kind of your asked about kids, I have kids that have who love travel and who love local music. So there's no work should be worth. See, that's a lot.
in the event, so the question was, how does the community know that there's an emergency shutdown? If there's an emergency shutdown, we notify the office immediately. Let them know we had readings, we had to shut the job site down immediately. That's how we share information with the community through the office.
We make for maybe some low tax suggestions here, like would you possibly like hang something on and then subside the site emergency, like that, kind of something very obvious. And because I mean, it's pretty hard.
Live on the other side. So not getting all of those things, like you would.
We can, yeah, we can,
You put like a red sheet over the gate, like, oh, maybe you don't have any kids like that.
we can definitely brainstorm ways of communicating it in the event of a shutdown. Yeah. so
Would
that-
you have a preferred way
Upper, yeah.
to be notified?
Below technical, we and I roll up and we. Emergency. Maybe not here. This is just an easy.
So
I don't have to sign it though, and it's
it's like a sign on the fence.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that.
Also, if she knows she's going to the park and you call the 1-800 number, could there be some, type of notification on that? Or the,
If there's a shutdown,
yeah.
yeah, we do that. Yes,
Yeah, there are a lot of sites and look like. That's the devil.
after the project's done, the plan is for it to look very similar to what it looks now. The fence will remain up and it'll have gravel cover.
Let's be you guys about your honor. When we previously to go, when we told today, I don't think to go, a suggestion we did that be the AD. Yeah, county could allow a community, a trusted community group to put their monitors on site. The purple, your monitor, the study I thought earlier, so it's the most common one, they're relatively affordable, and they're tended to be used for like community science. Is that something that people's guys would be open
On the property?
or on the fence? Where, you know, obviously that's another part. There are the details to be discussed, but is that something generally to reassure the community, would you be open to having something on site like the average person?
Yeah, if you want, I mean, if the community wants to set up their own air monitors where they want, that's absolutely your prerogative. I don't think it can be like inside, like the active work area, but if you want to put them nearby, right, or,
Like, you know, on the fence line or something like that, like near. I mean, I would say we're paying people, but we've been the more conversations here, so that will village access, so. Since it's come up, I just wanna add this. It's not your fault that you were walking into a very tight situation with both things, cycles demolition and this demolition come up, and a little bit on the front about both of those. And so my role in bringing this up is actually to do stuff before it starts, because it's also exhausting for the community groups who are trying to stay on top of everything. We would prefer that everybody just had very simple information in the first place, so we don't have.
yeah. No, I mean, setting up air monitoring close to the site, I think that's fine. The exact locations on the fence and we can work it out later. I just don't want to say on the fence is fine, and then find out, well, technically the fence, there's some esoteric reason as opposed to, oh, but a foot away.
If you'd be willing to have that conversation with
Yeah.
the neighborhood or.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And to take a step back, someone asked about the phone number, you asked about the phone number. I might want to, I think the phone number is just an automated, so leave a message. I don't think it has like, it's not like, and whether it's sports, it's not a sports weather or anything. Yeah, but you got it.
It's a park, a playground directly across the street from like here. So I think that's.
Yeah, we saw that. Oh, yeah.
Big concern.
Sure.
And so I don't know, Kate or anyone, said, are you asking like maybe put a monitor on the
Well,
playground?
just well, it's right there, but it's what they already forget. I mean, like, right. You know, and that's a little bit, that's for school.
No, that's great. And that's why we're here. Like, we want to hear feedback. Sometimes if we get caught up in, people get caught up in the technical of the project and need to hear. So thank you for that.
So there's two spots that we just.
Yeah.
talk about.
No, totally open to more conversation, more focused about logistics.
I think we
That's fine.
know when it's vision, right? It's like a down there in a conversation, or whenever we find out. It doesn't materialize, like the reality is we have to take care of ourselves, which means we probably need to have maybe air monitors and stuff. How do we know when that decision is taken? I think that might be an alternate question, but I'm not.
If you want to just ask.
Oh, yeah. Ultimately, the question was regarding the community setting up air monitors near the project area. And how soon would we be able to have those discussions, and how soon would the community know that was acceptable and where the air monitors could be set up?
I think that might be a separate meeting between People's Gas, and I'd like to get the Chicago Department of Environment involved in that conversation. I heard most of the conversation going on. I appreciate whoever it was that posed the question, because I think that is something that's been looming on everybody's minds, is understanding that this is an EPA regulated project, that the city takes sort of second chair on this. And this is not the same as a complex demolition where the air quality monitoring is different. Can you, so I think, let me answer that first part. Let me follow up with the Department of Environment, and if we can get whoever it was that asked that question, your name, if you'd like to be a part of this conversation, I'm happy to include you in it. It's certainly not something that I am by any stretch of the imagination an expert in. So happy to.
Alternately,
and-
it's they, we'd like to bring in capital, bring day and bring environmental, anybody else.
Yeah, we're happy to have that conversation. That I think the jurisdictional issues make it a little complicated on this, but I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with us wanting to monitor that differently. But I think this is a question that we have to ask the city. It's not for me necessarily to answer just directly here. I think this is a question for the city of Chicago as well. So we can do some follow up on that. Dylan, we'll make sure we include you on that as well. Can you just drop your email into the chat, or yeah, if you can drop your email, and a good email for you, into the chat, we'll make sure we contact you. Thank you. And then
Nicole, sorry, just make sure that you actually heard everything, I know it's hard. With the way that, the question was actually about, having a conversation with people about community groups or a community group, setting up their volunteer monitors near the site, and then there's something that the average person knows how to read, just for basic information. Scott said that they were open to that conversation.
yeah, that was so there were two things, and I did hear that part. Like, how would an average person driving around know whether or not the site was shut down, on its own because it set off an air monitor that operations were shut down. I know there was talk of a sign or something. I do think that if Peoples is open to this, I'm thinking like when you go to the beach and they tell you whether or not it's safe to be out in the water, something like a flag might be something bigger, higher up and obvious that we could put up versus just a sign on a fence, which you actually have to drive by at eye level to read the sign, versus something that is a little bit more visual. But these are new ideas, so I think that's something that we'll take back after this meeting and quickly get some follow-ups on.
Yes.
Yeah, I was, wondering how, the work on the site, interface with the river. I think on the southern portion of the site that we got here, the seawall is a lot lower. It's a lot easier for people to be able to interact with the river. As the kind of excavator get closer to the water's edge, what does that new seawall look like? Is there an opportunity to have a little more like the other part of the site, or is it something that would have to be just sheer high?
Yeah, I believe the work plan calls for, and Emily, jump in if I'm wrong, but calls for the sheet pile that's along the river to be the same, remain in place. That's sort of the natural barrier that keeps the river and the soil separate. So I can't speak for like other parts of the river or different elevation, but the plan is to have it be the same.
Same straight across, and then is the work then going, I guess, is there soil that's left in place kind of right along the seawall? Is there a point where they have to not stop because they're too close to the river?
Yeah, that's another reason we're using that routing technology I talked about, because that gives us a little more flexibility. Because to your point, you can't like scrape that, you can't, but then it turns into a whole other project. Like get right up to it, because the force of the water and the force of the soil are gonna.
Right, so then the next step that is in the river as the other option.
The sediment underneath.
So all of that before we address in that second step.
Correct, and that's one of the other, to get more in the winter. So maybe it's more appropriate, but by dealing with all the upland issues, then you can be assured, well, there's nothing upland, it's still leading into river. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. Now we know definitely because we cleaned it up. Now we have a site that's not having any external impacts from the gas plant site that we can focus on. So that's why it's done in two projects.
And I wonder, so this is part of an example, because I think that the bill that is generally very sterile, right? It doesn't have all soil microbes, all organic material. Is there an ability, I mean, I know we're talking gravel, is going to replace that thought, and it is your kind of ability, maybe, work with soil scientists to ensure that whatever might be is not gonna. You see the trees out there suffering, the grass and well, we're much all we're thought about what fit as a.
Yeah, one of the reasons we choose this coarse aggregate, basically little chunky limestones, is because one, it compacts super easily, so it makes the site really suitable for future work into. It's real easy to re-excavate. So in the event that, again, like I said, I can't speak for what's going to be there, but it's much easier to have to work through that to lay utilities, to put the foundation in, to scrape off and put sod, then to do anything else. So we've looked, that's a great point. I mean, we've looked at different means and methods. The other thing would be, for example, if we, put sod, right now we've got to maintain it and mow it, and there's a drought and it dies and becomes an eyesore. There's geese and beavers that eat a bunch of trees that we try to plant in the tree line. So it's like a Jeep. It's not very pretty, but it's very utilitarian and practical to have this coarse aggregate backfill.
This is the same strategy that was used today.
Yeah, and we cleaned up the site at Pitney and Archer, which just kind of resodded over time. And then, for those of you who remember the old Crowley's Gallery, we cleaned that site up too. A lot of sites nearby. Yes.
Based on the layout, old plan, are there any like bigger houses on this side that could, affect time or challenges? I don't know.
On the side we're proposing to work on,
Yeah,
Or-
it looks like.
no, they're underground structures, but we're used to working around there. So we have pretty good underground geotechnical data. We've got pretty good historic map, so we're not concerned about anything historic we find affecting our schedule. It's a good question.
Kim online has another question. She's asking if folks want to learn more about the air monitoring, who should they reach out to?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you have questions about your monitoring, I'm kind of the link, I think, between a lot of these groups that are talking today. So, yeah, I think EPA would be probably the first point of contact. Certainly, I think people can answer any of the technical questions as well. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any further questions. Kim on the air monitoring side.
The other questions?
Any other questions that we have right now?
Well, if there are any, again, I wanted to thank you for letting me come out and give the presentation. I'm sorry, Matt and Patrick were out of town. The timing didn't work out. Thanks for all the great points you brought up about air monitoring, about parking, about your kids and the park, and about communication. We'll do our best to listen to your feedback and tighten things up. And hopefully this moves forward with you guys, and us, EPA, and everyone, all these offices working together. And yeah, thanks again for your time. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Alvin.
We'll be posting the recording on our YouTube channel at the end of the week. And we'll have some items to follow up with folks on. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks, Alvin.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
How do we contact you to set that up? Like, I think the land use people, but we kind of end up confused. You're when they're coming over, they're meeting and like handle it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Do you, did council believe this phone? Waiting for this to happen, or did you make a name?
So